Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just jump into it. First question comes from Pangas7, who says, "Hey, Q, Bubba Ventrone and Mike Prefer were poor hirings. Is Todd Monken connected enough to fix this? Or will AB be in charge of that? What do you think they do?" So I think this is a twofold question, right? One, you're asking about the process to hire a new special teams coordinator and possibly a new defensive coordinator. Will Andrew Berry be in charge of this? Probably not. I think this will be led by Todd Monken. Will Andrew Berry be a part of it? I think most definitely. I think Todd will lead the process, but Andrew will have some say in what goes on. That being said, I want this to be very clear here, right? Because it's easy to point the finger at Bubba Ventrone. It's easy to point the finger at Mike Prefer and act like that's the only thing that went wrong with special teams. Yes, it's important to note that they weren't good and they were part of the problem, and ultimately them being replaced is something that's very justifiable. But also look at the situation that the Browns have put these guys in. And when I say that, I mean, look at the lack of support that they have for that specific coordinator position. That's the thing I want to see change. Whoever they hire, it'll be a name that I've never heard of because I don't keep up with the special teams coordinator coaching community. I don't know who's next up, who's a good coordinator, who's not. And just by judging by how people have reported Bubba Ventrone going to the LA Rams, where they're like, he's one of the best special teams coaches in football, I don't believe any of that bullshit anymore. I don't think anybody knows. I don't think anybody pays attention. Special teams is typically an afterthought to almost everybody, let alone special teams coordinator. So there's no reason to get passionate about whatever name they bring in to be the special teams coordinator for this team. It's more important to ask yourself questions about how they're going to support this special teams coordinator, right? Will this special teams coordinator be somebody that they support? And when I say support, are there going to be a lot of assistants on special teams? Is there going to be a specialist coach that helps with the kickers and the punters specifically? Basically, are you going to do some of the stuff that Baltimore did with their special teams to kind of be ahead of the curve on what most? Yeah, so that's the thing I'm mainly worried about, is just the support that they're going to give behind the scenes to whoever is the special teams coordinator, because I think that's been a big piece to why all of these hires, multiple times, have not worked. All right, let's jump to the next one. The next one is from Joe. Joe says this: FYI, Joe Thomas said that the new offensive line coach was his favorite coach and he's on par with Bill Callahan. He said you should notice a difference between how prepared young backup linemen are when stepping in for injuries. He said this on Nathan Zagura's show yesterday. So this is in response to George Warhop getting the offensive line coach job. Now, I don't doubt that Joe Thomas had a good experience with George Warhop and that he is not recommending him for anything other than like he truly feels this way about George. The only issue is when Joe Thomas was working with George Warhop, that was in 2009 to 2013, which is well over 10 years ago, about 13 years ago. And a lot can happen in 13 years, right? So yes, it's nice that he was a great coach in 2009 to 13 with Joe Thomas. But if you look at his recent history, there are some concerns there, right? Baltimore didn't necessarily make progress with him as the offensive line coach last year. If we go back to when he was at Jacksonville, similar progress was not made there. So it's really a question of like, yeah, we know at one point he was excellent at his job, but is he still capable of being good at his job at that level? It hasn't really showed itself over the last few years. Next question comes from Harrison, who says, could the Browns potentially trade Jim Schwartz? The answer to this is technically yes, but probably not. So you can technically trade Jim Schwartz, right? He's under contract for one more year. He would have to agree to it, right? You can't just trade him outright. He would have to agree to take a job somewhere, and then you can trade him. Will you be able to trade him? I doubt it. Like, I think Jim Schwartz is a good candidate, but I don't think he's such a great candidate that somebody will be willing to forego a draft pick just to secure him on their staff. I don't even think he's guaranteed to get a job this cycle. So you could, but I think it'd be a waste of time, because as long as you're trying to trade Jim Schwartz, you can't hire a new defensive coordinator, because part of the leverage you're going to use is that you're just going to keep Jim Schwartz, right? If they know you're just going to fire him, why in the world would they trade for him? Yeah, I just think it's a pointless exercise. At this point, Jim Schwartz can't come back. The rest of the league knows that you can't bring Jim Schwartz back. And even if you do bring Jim Schwartz back, it looks like a situation where you could just get Jim Schwartz next year. So just let him go, man. Like, if you're not getting a draft pick, you're not going to be able to trade him. Let's not get cute with it. He threw the temper tantrum. The writing's on the wall. He can't come back. Let's not waste any more time with this whole thing, and let's just move on, because there's no situation in which this ends with him coaching the Cleveland Browns next year and it's positive, right? Like, you can force him to stay and be the coach. It's not going to be a good result, because you have somebody in a position of being second in command on the football team that isn't really in lockstep or really in agreement with the head coach. Like, it was one thing if Jim Schwartz wanted to stay and Todd Monken wanted Jim Schwartz to stay. Would have had no problem with that. But now that it's obvious that Jim Schwartz does not want to stay, then he can't stay. It's really that simple. The next question comes from Kluber1, who says, Q, great content as usual. Do you have any feelings on, I think he meant Tarver, will be kept on the staff? He survived a few coaching changes. I truly think he's one of the better position coaches we've had over the year. You're going to have a discussion about fit, right? Like, it's going to, whenever you hire a new defensive coordinator, because if you have to hire a new defensive coordinator now, you're going to have a conversation about what it is that Tarver excels at as a linebacker coach, and if Tarver fits that mold, and if Tarver does fit that mold, then you should keep him. As long as he's willing to stay, right? It's another Jim Schwartz thing. If he wants to throw a temper tantrum or doesn't want to stay or wants to roll with Jim Schwartz, let him go. But if he's all for staying, then yeah, I would keep him. We're going to get into more questions, but first I got to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Hey, have you heard of the Sleeper app? It is a place where you can go to play fantasy football. It's also a place you can go to do picks. You can put your knowledge on the line, make some picks, and see who knows ball the most, and maybe even, be rewarded for your knowledge. Go on the Sleeper app. Make sure you sign up using the promo code Worst Take, and you'll get 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Make sure you check out the Sleeper app. Matthew asks this question. He says, Q, what players do you think could follow Todd Monken to the Browns? I think Isaiah Likely could follow Todd Monken to the Browns. Maybe Linderbaum, even though that looks like, I don't know, the market for Linderbaum, like, if it gets above 15 a year, I'm good. I'm good on missing out on that market. But yeah, I'm thinking Isaiah Likely makes the most sense. You're gonna have to get a second tight end. You're gonna want somebody cheaper than David Njoku, and you might be able to get Isaiah Likely cheaper than David Njoku. So Likely's the guy that makes sense for me. especially with Mark Andrews getting paid. So that's going to free him up. The next question comes from Justin. Justin says this. Hey, Q, really appreciate the content. I have a question about draft philosophy for the Browns this year. You often say, and I agree, that the draft's about adding talent and not drafting for need as much. So if Ruben Bain is there at 6, why should the Browns pass on him? From the film I've watched, he seems like a beast. I know we have heavy needs at different offensive positions, but it would be hard for me to pass on that kind of talent. I would agree here, but it's pretty similar to what happened last year, right? You're not just judging Ruben Bain based on, for the Browns at least. If you're the Browns, you're not just making your decision on Ruben Bain based on talent. You're making your decision on Ruben Bain based on opportunity, right? So is drafting Ruben Bain at 6 not just worth it as a player, as a fit on your team, the impact that he can have? Can he have a 6 overall impact on your team? That question, I feel like a lot of people feel like the answer can be yes there. But also, the bigger question is that going to outweigh the opportunity cost in maybe shopping that 6 pick to a team like Dallas, right? Who I think sits at like the 12th pick this year or something like that. Like that's the real question. If Dallas offers you a trade package for the number 6 pick to get Ruben Bain, is that package more worth it? Last year we did this math, the Browns did at least, and they said that the math was better for them to move back, take Mason Graham, use the extra pick to get Quincy Judkins, and then have an extra first this year. You know, a similar math can happen for the Cleveland Browns this year, where they're like, hey, we can move back, get some extra assets, and that would be more worth it than Bain. Ultimately, with somebody like Bain, it is a luxury because even if Ruben Bain is amazing, his impact is going to be kind of capped when you're working with Myles Garrett. And I know that might sound weird to some people, but hear me out on this. You're only going to be able to be but so effective at rushing the passer before teams decide to not even play in a way that allows you to rush the passer. We saw this with Pittsburgh last year, right? And a lot of other teams when the Browns played them. You're only going to be allowed to be so dominant before teams just decide to screen you to death and run the ball. And the Browns are already at that level. So it's not like Ruben Bain would like elevate where they're at. Like there is a ceiling to how dominant a defensive line can be in the NFL, especially with all the rule changes. So, and the Browns are pretty close to that ceiling already. I don't know if Ruben Bain, even though he's a great prospect, meaningfully affects that ceiling, not because he's a great player, not because he's not a great player. I think he is, but just because the Browns have so many good players on that defensive line, adding Ruben Bain would kind of just be overkill at that point. It would be unnecessary. You can reach your peaks without it, you know, which makes the value for him, for the Cleveland Browns, a lot lower than it would be for other teams, which is why I think in that kind of a situation, it's just much more likely that somebody values getting that pick at a rate that the Browns are willing to accept. So I think that's really the issue you run up with there, is just how much can you really do at pass rush more than what you're already doing right now and have invested in. Mike says this, hey Q, how long do you think they will give Monken? I believe he got a 5-year contract. Do you think he gets at least 3 seasons? I think he gets the standard deal that every coach in the NFL gets. The standard deal for every coach, even if it's a 5-year contract, is pretty simple. You get 2 years and a possible, right? Like you're guaranteed 2 seasons in most situations as a head coach. Obviously, there are situations where people do get fired after 1 year, but for the most part, you get 2 seasons. After that second season, it's about what you've demonstrated and if you're demonstrating a upward trajectory. So that's what it will be with Todd Monken. You know, I don't think he's a one. I don't think they're hoping him to be a one and done. I think they're going to give him 2 years, see where they're at in 2 years, and if they need to move on, they'll move on. You know, it's a standard coach hire. It's the same process as every other hire. With everything that's come out about the Ravens at least wanting Shador or to back up Lamar, would it be fair to assume that Monken possibly had a plan for him and that's why he was offered the job? I'm going to be so dead serious with you guys. I don't think Todd Monken being hired had anything to do with Shador. I don't think Shador came up as a serious topic of conversation in these head coach interviews, which would make sense because given Shador's level of play, given Shador's draft position, there's simply no reason for him to be brought up in the conversation like that. You know, whether he has a plan for Shador or not, I don't think it's really the main thing. I think he was brought in because they think he can develop young quarterbacks, and the Browns realize they don't have any on the roster right now. Maybe you could develop one that's on the roster if you got a vision for one of them, but I don't think the Browns were going to hire anybody because they got a vision for Shador or a vision for Dylan Gabriel. I think they were going to hire somebody because of larger things that they can bring to the table. So no, I don't think that Shador was really thought of in this head coaching search. And it makes sense because how many 5th round picks are centered in a conversation about what a team does at head coach? The answer is none. No 5th round picks after their rookie year get that kind of treatment. Johnny Uncharted says this: hey, do you think the core pillars of defense can remain with a Schwartz departure? Given the time spent in Cleveland, you could assume players and staff have caught on to some of the things Jim did. Yeah, I mean, Jim didn't do that much that was complicated. And I don't want to I don't want to downplay Jim's impact. Obviously, Jim was good at developing and, you know, had a decent eye for talent. But if we're talking about this team that's already been built defensively, at least, replicating that scheme should not be difficult, you know. So I don't anticipate that to be the case here. All right. The next question comes from Lion Pride, who says, with the report that the QB room is going to be changed, where do you think this change would come from? How would you feel about them attempting to revive Watson? And also, who would you want as the defensive coordinator? You guys got to stop asking me names. I don't care about the names, man. I don't want to put people in a situation where they look up some 28-year-old defensive coordinator or pass game coordinator, and they get all excited about him, and the Browns don't hire him, and you guys get all pissed off. You know, what traits do I want the defensive coordinator to have? I want somebody who runs a 4-3. I want somebody who cares about the front seven. I want somebody who cares about the defensive line. Other than that, I don't have specifics on the name. I'm not about to sit here and crash out about a name of a defensive coordinator hire. Are there some names I think would be interesting? Sure. You know, but I don't think it's going to take anything too crazy to get what you can get out this defense. So I don't want to play that game. How do I feel about them attempting to revive Watson? Here's the thing about that. He's had 2 Achilles tears and he had a season-ending throwing shoulder injury. Even if Deshaun Watson's problems from 2022 to 2023 were Kevin Stefanski related, like some people think, right? Like I think the reason that the people think that this Watson revival can happen is because they feel like Kevin didn't use him right. And there's some truth, right? Like Kevin and Deshaun was always an awkward fit, and maybe Todd Monken's a more natural fit with Deshaun Watson. But the reality is that we're beyond, you know, what if an offense fits Deshaun Watson at this point. He's had 2 Achilles tears. He's had a throwing shoulder injury. The issue is that he might be physically cooked. And there's a lot of evidence from 2024 that would strongly suggest that he's physically cooked. And that was before he tore his Achilles 2 times. The issue with Watson is not who the offensive coordinator is anymore. The issue with Watson is just how much is left physically for his body to do. That's the big question with Deshaun Watson. Everybody keeps bringing this up. His body is cooked. So, like, before you can even get excited about him being in a new offense, you got to answer the question of, hey, can his body hold up? And can he throw the football with any zip on it? Because the last time he was out there, he didn't have anything left on that arm. And it wasn't the strongest arm to begin with. So that's the issue with Watson. You know, I think people forget that he's had 2 Achilles tears and a throwing shoulder season-ending injury. Also, another thing to consider, Deshaun Watson now, in the last, since 2020, he already had missed like 700 days, or what was it, 500 days? Yeah, he had missed like 500 days in that first initial period of time where he missed football games. And now he's going to jump to missing 700 games in the last 5 years, 700 days in the last 5 years. We saw what the first long patch out of football did to him. We're going to wonder what the second one after an Achilles tear that he tore twice. I don't know, man. I think there are just so many reasons to not really even put that in your mind as something. Now, if Watson comes to camp and he's throwing dots and he looks like old Deshaun Watson, we can have that conversation. But until he demonstrates that he isn't physically cooked, I don't really think there's anything worth talking about there with him. Maui Tank says this. With the Browns, are the Browns really married to Jim Schwartz on the coaching search, or is that just another thing the media is pushing out? Looking back at it, it seems like they wanted Monken from the start. He was first in both interviews, and I feel like the process was more or less confirming that compared to the other coaches. I think Jim Schwartz was mentioned, but I doubt it was like take it or leave it. Yeah, I've learned one thing throughout this whole thing. I am never ever leaning on like reports, rumors, and sources on anything Andrew Berry related again. I'm not doing it because every time people get caught up in leaks and rumors and sources about Andrew Berry, it be dead ass wrong. And the reason it be dead ass wrong is something that we know, but we never really think about in time. He don't just have shit out there. Okay. Like, that's not how he operates. He doesn't have stuff out there. He's not going to leak who gets the job before they're ready to announce who gets the job. It's just the more noise you hear about Andrew Berry, like the less you should believe it, because it has been 5 years now 6 years, and it's been the same story every time. So yeah, that's my lesson I've learned. I'm going to stick to the critical thinking when it comes to trying to predict Andrew Berry, because that's been way more successful. But yeah, the leaks, the rumors, the sources, the insider stuff, that stuff, it's never accurate with Andrew Berry. And I think that's for a reason. So yeah, that's what I've learned from this whole thing. But let me know what you've learned. Thank you guys for asking questions. You guys have a great day. Have you met a night. Peace.